Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is Hannah Zuberi, and I'm here with the Justice for All Now show. And today we're going to be discussing the release of USCIRF, which is the United States Commission for International Religious Freedoms Annual Report 2020. And particularly, we're going to be discussing the recommendations made by USCIRF on India. So, specifically, the recommendations that were made in this report this morning was to designate India as a country of particular concern, or CPC, for engaging and tolerating systematic, ongoing, and egregious religious freedom violation as defined by the International Religious Freedom Act. It also urges the US government to impose targeted sanctions on India's government agencies and officials responsible for severe religious violence by freezing those individuals' assets or barring their entry into the United States under human rights related financial and visa authorities, citing specific religious freedom violations. A lot of this is based on what has transpired in India in 2019. This has been the diligent work of the Commission, as well as many human rights organizations, advocacy organizations, peace and justice organizations, as well as those concerned about religious freedom of minorities in India, specifically the Muslim minority. There are other recommendations as well that we'll be talking about with our guests today. And for that, I will be inviting Dr. Rehan Khan, who is the president of the International Society of Peace and Justice. He's a practicing physician, and he's also very active in advocacy for the Indian Muslim cause. He's from India himself, and I'd like you all to welcome Dr. Rehan Khan. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Khan.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you for joining us today. And I just wanted to ask you, how are you feeling? This is a pretty big milestone.
It is the first step. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for bringing me. It is an excellent day for the advocacy of Indian Muslims. And this is a first step. We still have, the fight is still going on. This is just a recommendation from USCIRF. We want the State Department to listen to it and follow it and implement it. It is high time. It has been going on for years. Finally, and I thank from the bottom of my heart Justice for All and all other organizations and every single person who has worked for this cause to get to this point. This is bigger than the ban on Modi, because this is for the entire India. And as an Indian, it's a mixed feeling because our country is being looked down by the entire world. The whole world is condemning India for its violations of human rights, for its religious rights. So 2019 has been the worst year for the Muslims as well as other religious minorities. And the people or the current administration, they think that nobody's watching. We live in a global village. The world is watching. They're not going to forgive these egregious crimes that are happening. I just watched a video that a girl who is pregnant has been arrested by Delhi police for inciting the Delhi riots. The Delhi riots victims were Muslims. Muslims were not the aggressors, but they're turning it, and they're turning it on the Muslims. She is pregnant in her second trimester in the month of Ramadan. She is in jail, because she happens to be a Muslim. And these egregious violations are being noted by the international human rights organizations, by other governments. The first time the Muslim countries, organization of Muslim countries have issued statements. Different other Arab countries have issued statements. Some people have been sent back for putting on the media anti-Muslim tirade that has been going on. Now they're paying attention. This Babri Masjid issue, when they had demolished the money, the gold bricks were sent from Saudi Arab, people who were working in Saudi. One of the journalists told us. So this money, and that is funding the BJP, and that BJP is coming down very hard on Muslims. If Muslims want to work with the current administration, they want to do their part, and they have been doing it, but the BJP government has been brutal. You were saying something?
Yes. So I wanted to bring into the conversation, um, the fact that this report, the importance of this report. So since 2004, this is the first time that India has been designated, and the recommendation is now being sent to the State Department of the United States that India should be designated as a country of particular concern. Why is this so important? Why is this designation by USCIRF so important?
It is important because India has been enjoying, and India actually is a friendly country to United States, and they have been enjoying all the benefits of a friendly nation. By being friendly nation, as the USCIRF said it very nicely, he said, it does not matter if you're friendly or you're against us. If there is a religious violation, we're going to point it out and we're going to say it. And I think as a friendly nation, it is incumbent upon United States of America to use all its good offices to pressure India to make sure that they do not commit violence against the religious minorities. These are the people of their own country. These are Indian citizens, whether they're Christians, they're Muslims, they're Jewish, they're Sikh. They should have all the equal rights. If you want to call it a democratic country, it is a democratic country, but sometimes the democracy is defined differently for different people, different races. Even some Hindus of lower caste are not being treated equal. So all we are trying to say is give equal rights, and it is India's own doing. I mean, they did not have to bring this bill of CAA. The minute they brought CAA, USCIRF had mentioned that if this bill passes, we are going to recommend sanctions, and they have recommended sanctions. Now it is our job to make sure that that does get implemented by the State Department, because there will be a lot of pressure from all sides, from some of the Hindu India friends. I mean, we are also friends of India, but we want freedom and justice for all Muslims. The abrogation of Article 370 was not a good thing that they did. And now the people of Kashmir are deprived. I mean, they were living in lockdown. The entire India is living in lockdown. They're using the COVID to to take away the religious freedom of Muslims. In the state of UP, no masjid is allowed to make a call on the loudspeaker. That does not violate any social distancing law. That does not violate anything, lockdown laws. Only one person can go and call it that. They are doing it in United States. In US, the governor of Maryland had requested the faith communities to pray for the people during COVID. And this is what India should do. They should take the help of all the religious communities to pray for this calamity that has hit the human beings.
So Tony Perkins, who is the chair of USCIRF, when he made this designation, when he announced this designation this morning, he particularly noted that India had deteriorated. In their view, India had deteriorated over the years. And whereas there have been countries around the world who have been working with USCIRF, and have risen. For example, Sudan and Uzbekistan have actually they were given, they were low, their standards were lowered, and they were designations were lowered, and so now they're not a country of particular concern anymore. And how does that make you? And for to comment on that too, I'm going to also invite um, Zahir Adil, who is a thank you, Brother Zahir, for being here. Zahir Adil is our Save India Project lead with Justice for All. He's also an Indian Muslim. And we've been discussing this internally all this entire morning. But I wanted to bring you in and get both of your thoughts on that. That how does it make you feel? I mean, Dr. Han touched on that a little bit earlier. That it's sort of sad and bittersweet, right? That you see your country being following that path. But considering, and Zahir, I would like you to mention the fact that you have been working on stopping genocide with the Burma Task Force, with the Save Uyghur Project campaign. What similarities have you seen that make you that make that bittersweetness even more bitter? And this message by Tony Perkins of USCIRF, that while other countries around the world have become better at their religious freedom, but India has taken a turn for much, much worse.
Thank you, Hina, for having me on. Appreciate it a lot. You're right. I mean, it is a bittersweet
I
moment.
think we cannot hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So, as I was saying, it is a bittersweet moment. I have very fond memories of growing up in India. I have many Hindu friends, I have many Christian friends. And it pains me deeply to see where the BJP was taking the country. But while it is bittersweet, there is some sadness obviously involved, because I've always wanted India to grow a lot from the inclusivity point of view, from the religious freedom point of view, and I actually thought that it would go in that direction. But after the BJP came to power 2014, we have seen a systematic abrogation of these freedoms that people had. For the Muslims specifically, I think a lot of it had to do with the acceptance. In a way, it was a frustrated acceptance of what happened with the Babri Masjid, of what happened with the triple talaq. But then I think the BJP tried to go one step further with Article 370, as Dr. Saab mentioned, and then with the CAA, with the NRC. So they have continually put one or the other pressure on the Muslims and on the minorities. Now you come to something more recent, with Subramaniam Swamy essentially saying that equality in the Indian sense means a different thing than we think of it here in America. We are not even in the equal category, as he specifically had said. So from that point of view, with all of these things happening, I think it's a good thing that finally our country now, my home country at this time is the United States, and my home country has recognized that's what's happening in my birth country amounts to something that is not good, not only for India, not only for the relationship that we have with them, but also for the world. This has to stop. For the second part of your question, if I might just touch upon that, we have seen exactly the same things happen, especially in the case of Myanmar with the Rohingya, where the initial steps was to disenfranchise them, to strip them of citizenship one way or the another, and to keep pressing on them until we saw the final thrust happen in 2017. I'm glad, at least in this case, the United States has taken some steps. At least this is step number one, as I've been telling my friends, that might help us stop whatever the BJP had planned for the Muslims of the country. Back to you, Hina.
Well, exactly. Let's go over some of these designations, and hopefully we can get Dr. Khan back up in here. So let's go over some of these designations that have particular recommendations. So one that was particularly interesting to hear was that the Commission recommends that the U.S. Embassy and consulates engage with religious communities.
I cannot hear anyone.
Um,
Yeah,
I'm sorry if you're having a little bit of
no,
trouble. We can hear you.
I
We
can't
can
hear
hear.
anything.
So we can hear you. So yes, thank you so much. Um, yes. So basically, what they have recommended is that the U.S. Embassy and consulates engage with religious communities, local officials, and police, especially in regions impacted by religiously motivated violence, and increase U.S. partnership with Indian law enforcement to build capacity to protect religious minorities, houses of worship, and other holy sites, and confront religiously based hate crimes. Um, th- I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. Um, I think actually that's a good step. We saw in the case of the Rohingya where where one village was being attacked, and when the United States embassy in Myanmar had taken it upon themselves to just send an observer there, the local authorities got very concerned about it, and they were able to stop whatever they had planned, whatever the attackers had planned for it. We have seen in India many attacks happening. In the recent riots in Delhi, there was an attack on several of the masajid there, and then we had attacks on communities which are mostly Muslim or some other minority. And if the embassies and consulates are now, uh, not to use the term embedded, but at least deeply associated with the local authorities, I think there will be a lot of pressure on the local authorities to make sure that they do not look the other way when rioters will attack some minority institutions in the country.
Uh, so this is interesting, and because in some ways this is a welcome, the recommendations are welcome, but this particular recommendation is a double-edged sword, right? So I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Dr. Rehan. I don't think he can hear me, which is unfortunate. We can hear you if you could like to talk.
I don't think you might know the question.
Okay, yeah, he might not be able to hear the question. That's true. Um, so so that's something that perhaps that we can discuss over here is how do you keep the sovereignty, because that could be considered a foreign country interfering with the sovereign matters of internal matters of a country. But then there's also that watchdog that you have been. And then how do we as Americans, when we see um, our religious freedoms being attacked here in the United States, like what authority do we have to say this to someone else, right? To actually make those statements about someone. So it's a precarious situation to be in, even as an American. But what is good to know is that people are listening, people are watching, and the Hindu nationalist agenda of the Modi government, who has had sort of carte blanche over the past several years, is now, people are taking notice, and their soft power and the fact that their businesses all over the world will not stop people from commenting and making these recommendations.
Yeah. I think what happened is that the BJP relied on its disinformation cell a whole lot. They thought they would be able to stifle anything that might be said against them. But as we saw recently, after the Corona jihad and all of the attacks that they had against Muslims in the country, asking people not to buy from Muslim vendors, when one princess in the United Arab Emirates made a statement, a very positive statement, where she said that she's grown up with Indians in her house and she probably knew more Indians than Arab people as she was growing up.
Mhm.
That made the government take notice. So I think it's very important. Also, from the world is a global community. right? And as they say in local instances, it takes a village to raise a child. It really takes the world to keep certain nations within it in the right direction. And so, while yeah, I can certainly see that it might be seen as an attack on the sovereignty of a nation, but then that nation needs to understand that there are certain rules and regulations, that there are certain um, mannerisms that the world expects of every nation, not only India, but every nation in the world.
And particularly a nation that is termed as the largest
Mm.
democracy in the world, right? A nation that has those friendly relations with the United States based on the fact that they're the largest democracy, and they have the strength of institutions. So that is something, and that is something I believe that the report addresses is not only the policies that were passed, the CAA, the Citizen Amendment Act, as well as the National Registry. Um, so these were some of the things. So let's take a closer look at what all was discussed in this report. And I'm going to try to bring Dr. Rehan back in. I'm sorry, he's having a little bit of technical issues. Can you hear us now, Dr. Rehan? Can you hear us now?
Maybe we need to make a phone call to him. Somebody can.
Perhaps, yeah, that could be something that perhaps we could do. Um, okay, so he's saying he can't hear us. So let's continue and talk about a little bit about. Um, and then one of the other recommendations is that they encourage the U.S. Congress to continue to hold hearings highlighting religious freedom conditions in India and U.S. policy towards India. Um, the some of the things that the key points that they brought up were that during 2019, the United States and India strengthened their relationship, particularly in security and defense. And then in December, the two governments signed an agreement for defense technology transfers during a 2+2 ministerial dialogue. They move on and talk about how the President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi appeared together at the Howdy Modi event in Houston. And amongst these developments, U.S. officials highlighted concerns with India's religious freedom violations through public statements, congressional hearings, and bilateral engagements. And then in October, Ambassador Brownback traveled to India. Now, USCIRF has never been hasn't been allowed. No, I wouldn't say yet never, but hasn't been allowed in recent years to travel to India. And the Indian government, however, continues to reject the State Department and USCIRF's reporting on religious freedom violations in the country. So this was recorded in their report. So, would you like to comment a little bit about uh, that relationship between the two governments?
Sure. I think relationships between the governments is good. Economic progress is a good thing, not only in the case of India and the United States, but in the case of any country in the United States. But at the same time, when we are engaging in relationships with them, with technology transfers with them, we also have to be aware of how those technologies are being used, or where the technologies that we give to them as Americans might be used. At the same time, we as Americans have to also ask that they stand by certain expectations that we would have of them. Now, you had touched upon the fact that there is some erosion of religious rights right here in the United States, and that's true. But we have to continue to ask for our rights over here as equals, and we know that that's at least on the books there. But so far, at least in the United States, we should be happy that we have not seen the sorts of discrimination, the sorts of on the street fighting and attacks that we are seeing in India, and we are hoping that we will never get there.
You share that a little bit. What are we seeing?
In India, we are seeing many attacks on Muslims. We are seeing a lot of disinformation. We see videos taken from many years ago, and then they are put on social media with a message that would incite hate against Muslims. That's taken up by certain people upon themselves. They will go out and attack some Muslim communities And then it turns out that those videos that were shared, the pictures, the text that was shared, had no relationship with what's been happening. Or in many cases, they may not even be Muslims, but they take something and they turn it into a weapon. So, as with Corona Jihad and as at JFA, we've been saying that India is probably the only country that found a weapon even within a virus. And they took it and turned it against a section of their own population. This is very dangerous. And I'm hoping that no other country follows their lead. Unfortunately, China started it with black people, but India is the one that we have to say is the one that recognized that it can even use something as dangerous as a pandemic and turn it against a section of its own people.
That's so, Dr. Rehan, would you have any commentary on that?
Yeah, it's very sad. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. It's good to have you back.
Yeah, it is very sad. I attended a conference here in DC, and they don't want to be discussed what it was discussed. But the person who presented, he did introduce in the meeting that some countries are using COVID uh, to have religious discrimination. And the good thing is that I had a presentation that day, and that was titled as India's response to COVID-19 and its religious discrimination against the religious minorities, including Muslims. Muslims are at the uh, at the receiving end. And what bothers me is that this lockdown is very dangerous, especially during the month of Ramadan when people need to go out and buy essential things. In those areas, there are certain areas that nobody can enter. Even Khudai Khudmatgar, who is delivering food in Delhi, cannot enter those areas. They have to give it to the police, and then police will decide whose houses they're going to go and give it to. So this is very concerning. The other thing that is concerning is a lot of government aid is being distributed through RSS because it's a social organization, so-called social organization. So you can imagine who is getting it and who is not getting it. So these things are very concerning, especially on top of a pandemic. You have Ramadan when people have to fast and they cannot get the things that they need for their Ramadan. So I'm very, very concerned.
So you
And
said you
India,
mentioned
actually, as the brother used,
you mentioned that RSS
say that again.
is considered a
Yeah,
social
yeah,
organization. So if you could talk a little bit about.
social organization. That absolutely, and that's how it gets the money from the government. The government gives. RSS was not known in India. Majority of the people, it was an outcast, and it was heavily watched by the Congress government. During Congress regime, they had to every meeting they had to be monitored by the Central Intelligence Department that India has. But after Modi's government, it has a free hand. But even in that time, in 1977, when the Janata Party came into existence and BJP didn't exist at that time, they had Janasangh and they had something else, I think, in that. After that, BJP came into existence. And Jansangh was part of the coalition government, and the coalition government gave 600 crore to RSS as a social organization to help the communities. And so that is the day that they started becoming more organized and well funded. And now the funds are being sent from all over the world, and they have branches all over the world. So what we need to ask them is ask USCIRF to to make RSS an entity of particular concern. You don't have to be a government to be called. So non-governmental organization can be designated as an entity of concern. So, and the next thing we should do is ask for its ban, at least the ban in the United States. United States or other countries do not have RSS; they have HSS. It is the same thing because R means Rashtriya. It has to be in that country. In any other country, the irony is that they were showing meetings of RSS in Saudi Arabia, meetings of RSS in Muslim countries, and that is where they're raising funds. They're making big time fundraisers, and that money goes to India to discriminate against the Muslim minorities. And we need to take note of it. We need to be at the forefront. Not everybody is going to do it, but once people hear it, they will know it and they will try to distance themselves from RSS.
Do you have anything to say to that, Sahir?
Yes, I think Dr. Saab's concern is very valid. I mean, we have to keep watching what their directions will be in this country, and we have to make people aware that this organization, whether it is called RSS in India or HSS here, really comes from Nazi roots. That's what they believe. They they idolize Hitler. They come from from those basic tenets of fascism. That's from where this organization has grown. So we need to make people aware. As far as yes, we also need to, if we can get it the USCIRF to talk about RSS as an organization of concern, that would be great. That would really go one step further, because at the root of it all, it is not the India, it's not the Indian people that's the problem. It's this ideology, and we'll have to fight this ideology any which way we can.
And this is interesting. This is something that the report notes. For example, cow slaughter and lynching plus mob violence is particularly highlighted in this report. So they talk about where major BJP ruled states mob lynchings have occurred of people suspected of slaughtering cows or consuming beef and most attacks occurred in states that are ruled by BJP. They also note that lynch mobs often took on overtly Hindu nationalistic tones. They would, chant "Hail to Lord Rama," and they beat them to death. And they've been, even right now, we're hearing and seeing videos come out that the same sort of Hindu nationalistic tones are coming out, that we even while giving away food during this COVID-19 pandemic, that people are being asked to say this before they'll get that food basket. And then they note, well, they didn't note that about the pandemic, but they did talk about mob lynchings in BJP ruled states. They also talk about police often arresting those attacked for cow slaughter or conversion activities rather than the perpetrators. So that the report has made note of that too. And then they particularly noted that violence against Christians has also increased. So this is not just a Muslim issue. There were 328 violent incidents with Christians that took place in India in just 2019, and often under the accusation of forced conversions. And these attacks frequently targeted prayer services and led to widespread shuttering or destruction of churches. And then they also noted that in February 2020, 3 days of violence. They noted the Delhi pogrom that we've talked about a lot, and which operated under the Home Ministry's authority. So this is very particular to note, because these are the things that activists have been telling USCIRF, particularly because a lot of people don't understand how Delhi's the capital works, right? And this had to be people who are actually watching and monitoring this to let them know that this is not like the United States, where the police in Washington, D.C. would fall under the mayor, and the federal police that is separate. And so, but this police that was attacking, that was monitoring that violence, of the mobs attacking and not doing anything about it was actually directly under the Home Ministry. And so I'd love to get Dr. Khan's perspective on this. I know we've discussed this a lot between the two of us. So inshallah, if you could talk a little bit about them.
Yeah, so Delhi is the only state in entire India where it doesn't have its own police. Every state has its police force. In Delhi, the police is still, because this is the newest one of the newest states. Delhi was not a state; it was a union territory, and then police was under the central command. That was fine. So now still the police is still under the control of the Union Home Minister, which is Amit Shah. So we consider him directly responsible for the Delhi program. He is responsible for that because the police was under his control. And not only that, they turn around and I still have to see any major Hindu players, terrorists being arrested for those riots. There are pictures. The guy is climbing on the minaret of a masjid and putting a flag. Why is that guy is not under arrest? The guy is opening fire in public against Muslims. They are not under arrest. Why? And coming back to RSS, one more thing. This is the only organization that used to support Hitler is still in operation in the entire world. There is no organization that is in operation with who was supporting Hitler. Anybody who supported Hitler is out of business a long time, and these people are the only people who are still in operation, and that needs to be brought up. These are the people who killed the father of nation. They are the killers of Gandhi. They are holding the power right now. They have no respect for Gandhi. Gandhi, actually, they were opposed to Gandhi. And the entire country has high respect. So even those people who are in the government, as he said, we are not against India. We are not against Indian people. It is the minority of the people who are supporting Modi. And with that support, he is just doing things that are horrible. And at some point, he needs to stop. And we need to ask the Middle Eastern countries, whoever gave him the Peace Prize, need to reconsider after this report has come. We should bring it to their attention and say, please reconsider your decision to give him the Peace Prize. And the decisions have been reversed, or say something very, very strong. So the strong message goes after the Middle East embassies and their princes have issued statements, things have changed, but things have changed only on the surface. The atrocities continue going on. People are still getting arrested. People are still not getting food. People are still getting denied medical care just because they're Muslim. In the state of Gujarat, in Ahmedabad, they have two separate units, one for Muslims and one for non-Muslim. You can imagine where the care is being given and which section is being ignored. So that is what is happening. The number of dead in Gujarat is going up significantly. Uh, some channels are still talking about Tablighi Jamaat. Majority of them have stopped blaming them after the statement from Middle East, but one or two are still doing it. And we need to go after these channels as well, who are spreading hatred, because this is where it hurts. Where this is where it starts. Once they stop demonizing a section of the community, a section of the population, then it becomes easier to kill them, because these people are not needed. These are undesirable people. They're not humans. Astaghfirullah. You make them subhuman. And once you make them subhuman, then their work becomes easier.
Exactly. And that is what that's a stage of genocide. And that's what people have to understand. All of this, once all the things that we are seeing currently happening in India, and we've talked about this with previous guests as well, are things that are pointing towards a path that if we don't stop it now, that even the people of India will regret this. The ones who don't speak up, who and I read this commentary today on something on Bluffer, which is very poignant. Very poignant. It was written by a middle class man in Delhi. He lives in upper class neighborhood in Delhi, and then he talks about how his neighbors, and these are well-to-do liberals living in well-to-do neighborhoods, and how the rhetoric amongst them has changed in just this past year, and how the coronavirus and everything that is being blamed on Muslims particularly has changed the rhetoric amongst even local neighborhoods where before Hindus and Muslims live side to side, and there might be many Muslim neighbors who live in those same buildings, are on those neighborhood WhatsApp groups, but they can't even speak up because now their own neighbors who've been living next to them just heard about a nurse that was killed by, was attacked. She's coming back from the hospital, taking care of patients, and her neighbors attacked her and they molested her and they let her know, go back to some Muslim country, and that's where you belong. So even frontline workers who are working to save Indians from the virus are being attacked. So this is something that we are particularly. So let's talk a little bit about where this goes next. So this report has come out, and I'm sure we're going to be sitting and dissecting it for a couple of days and seeing where the strength of it and the weaknesses of it, and what else can be done to really show the world what is happening in India. Because a lot of times, just I would, a lot of times, like, we don't know what's going on in Nigeria, right? We attend the International Religious Foundation roundtables, and we hear what is happening to minorities over there, and we sympathize with them. But we learn that because we're in those spaces, and a lot of people are not in these spaces. So how do we inform the rest of the world who is not concerned about, and use this report to talk about the atrocities? Oops.
We should do is have this report. We should write letters to all the Muslim countries, every single one of them, and have this report as an attachment. Bring their attention to this report. Yes, it is online. Yes, it is available everywhere. But how many things go online every single day? And how many people have time to go ahead and read? But when it becomes personalized, when it goes with your personal note, all the organizations, Muslim individuals, Muslim leaders, they should write to the Muslim countries, and not only the Muslim countries, the other peace-loving countries as well, England, Germany, France, all these countries, bring to their attention what India is doing to its minorities and how religious freedom is fragile. They may not care about the Muslims, but everybody cares about the religious freedom. Religious freedom is important to Hindus as well, because if they're living in Europe, or they're living in Muslim country, they need that religious freedom. If they don't have it, they will not be able to practice their religion. So religious freedom is important, and for every single individual. So wherever you go, at least you are allowed. And religious freedom is part of the human rights charter. It is one of the most basic human rights. So anyone violating somebody's religious freedom is violating the human rights. And the entire world, majority of the world countries have signed on the Charter of International Human Rights Declaration. And India is one of the signatories, and India has to fulfill that commitment that it has made to the world. Otherwise, the countries of the world should isolate India and put them on the spot. Tell them, do you want to be part of the world community, or do you want to be as an isolated, small, little, some kind of Hindu nation that doesn't care about anybody else? You cannot discriminate against 2 to 300 million of your own citizens just because believe in a different God. If they start believing in your God, then they will become nice people. Tomorrow they change their mind, you're gonna deport them. So it does not work, and it does not help. It has not helped Russia for the longest period of time of religious persecution. Russia still has Muslim population. Same thing in China. Same thing in so many other countries. In
So
Yugoslavia, they had
I,
ban on the Muslims.
I wanted to talk a little bit about perhaps if we could talk a little bit about how Hindu Americans will react to this report.
Can see in a lot of Twitter storm that is going on. Some of them are totally denying it. Some of them are saying this is absolutely right. There were a lot of discrimination against Muslims was going on. There are a lot of Hindus that are against this. I mean, Hindus for human rights. They are speaking out big time. And a lot of Hindus, it is majority of the Hindus are against this policy. Otherwise, Muslims could not live in India. Muslims live in India with peace and harmony with majority of the Hindus, and they have been doing it for centuries. Otherwise, they would not have survived there. But it is the small section. The problem is that majority does not always speak out. They don't want to go against the current government. But a lot of majority of the Hindus do not like this, and this will cost India economically. Imagine if Arab countries draw their hands away from India. What will happen?
This is Zahir. Did you want to say something about that? I was just asking if you had some comments. What do you think will be the reaction of the Hindu American community to this report?
I think, unfortunately, I'm not very hopeful of a good reaction from a lot of people, because the ones, as we have seen in every project, it's the ones who are deeply vested into something that's happening in India that will make the most noise. That does not mean that a majority of Hindu Americans favor what's going on in India, but they are probably amongst a silent majority in this country. But I would like my Hindu cousins to understand this. A lot of supporters of the RSS in this country oppose majoritarianism in this country, because they know that if the majority somehow comes to power, if the Ku Klux Klan in a new form comes back, then it's not only the blacks who would be targeted, it would be the Muslims, it would be the Browns, whether that person is a Hindu, Buddhist, it would not matter. So majoritarianism will not work. But you cannot support majoritarianism in India while opposing it here, because that's extremely hypocritical. So that's a message that I would like my cousins, I'll still call them my cousins, who are here in this country and are supporting what the BJP is doing in India.
Excellent. So while we're talking about this, I would like to invite our Director of Outreach from Canada to discuss a little bit about what the reaction, he's been following this on Twitter as well, so a little bit about what he's been seeing on Twitter as a reaction to this report. And then this is Shahab Khan, he's our Outreach Director in Toronto, Canada. And Shahab, I'd like to get your comments on particularly what you think, how Canada will view this report, and what will be the reaction of the Canadian government to this report.
First of all, thank you for having me on. Thank you, Dr. Rehan Khan, for your thoughts. Before we get into how Canada is going to react, we have to understand that this is I know, Sister Hannah, you've talked about this earlier. This is a very big accomplishment and a win for every human rights activist groups or person that's doing the work. Your work does make a difference. So I think we need to point that out first. Zahir did mention that, and maybe just in passing, he mentioned that the Muslims in India kind of have accepted things accepted some of the things going on with the Babri Mosque, with some of the the rulings that have come down. I personally don't agree with that. I think the Muslims of India and the Muslims of Kashmir, they haven't accepted it or ignored it. They haven't ignored what the BJP government is doing. They actually fear for their lives. They fear for their death. And that's because that's how the BJP and the RSS work. So with the report itself, and we'll talk about, and the Canadian reaction, some of the people and the partners that I've been talking to, we've had a discussion, and let's put aside the NRC, the CAA, the CAB, the Article 370, Article 25, put away the tweets, put away the Facebook messages. By reading this report, it has to be simply just a wake-up call to every government, to every NGO, to the people of India in Canada, to the people of India in the US, the people of India everywhere, that we're listening to you. We're listening to the Indians in India. We're listening to you, whether you're Hindu, you're Sikh, you're Christian, you're Buddhist, Jain, upper or lower caste. We're actually listening to you. So keep doing what you're doing in India, because in Canada, and I'll talk about Canada, we're actually watching the BJP. We're actually watching the RSF. We're watching Modi. We're here for you. The other discussion that we had, and on my social media, and it's the picture right here behind me of Pandit Nehru. He started the Nehru Committee in 1928 to write the Constitution. And I know Dr. Rehan probably knows this, and Zira probably knows, and most of our listeners do too. In the preamble, it assures its citizens justice, equality, liberty, and endeavors to promote fraternity. It guarantees liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. Mm-hmm. And there's Article 25. Article 25, all persons are entitled to freedom of conscience and religion. So the discussions I've had on Twitter today have been the opposite of that, have been how can a government like I'm not going to call India, how can the government like the BJP, the RSS, all the other groups, the right-wing groups, how can they actually go against the Constitution that Nehru, Prasad, Patel, and others, Savarkar, have written for them, and their country was founded on? So that's been a lot of the discussion. Also, we spoke about what's the reaction of Hindu Americans, Hindu Canadians. The BJP government, through Anurag Srivastava, he's a spokesman of Ministry of External Affairs, has stated that, and it's in a bunch of articles, we reject the observations on India in the USCIRF annual report. It's biased, and its comments against India are not new. But on this occasion, its misrepresentation has reached new levels. Mm-hmm. And has not been able to carry its own commissioners in its endeavor. And that's regarding to 3 commissioners who are against this and for India. We regard this organization, the USCIRF, of particular concern, and we would treat it accordingly. So that's some of the sentiment that's coming out of India. Some of my partners on social media that are speaking about this in Canada. I mean, it'll continue, just like Dr. Khan was saying, just like Zahir was saying. I mean, this morning before the report came out, we had a politician, Suresh Tiwari, who's from UP. He's BJP MLA. He started talking about don't buy vegetables from Muslims because we might be, I say we, because Muslims might be spitting on them. So little things like this actually add up. And obviously they knew that this report was coming out today, so they got ahead of it. The greatest thing governments and parties do is they get ahead of the news. So they've already tried to spread I'm not going to say fake news. They've already tried to make small things into big things on their social media channels, obviously with WhatsApp being huge and Twitter. So they've already tried to do that. And in Canada, I've seen myself with my many Hindu friends, whether they agree with me or not agree with me. If you look at their feeds and their social, it's littered with this anti-USCIRF RIF report. But I can't comprehend how, whether you're uneducated or not educated, if you read the report, how you cannot see what the BJP and the RSS is doing. That's what
I think, and which is interesting because when previous reports have come out, they have been accepted and they have been, used to shape policy. So not just by India, but by a lot of countries around the world. So this is interesting that when the report is against you, then it's not acceptable. but when it's against other countries, then it should be used in the various forms. So this is something very interesting.
So, and to that topic, on April 13th, there was a statement released by the same organization talking about how Pakistan is not feeding its minorities. It's not making sure that the whether it's Hindu, Christian, it was Hindu and Christian, we're not taking care of the minorities. And there was no uproar from the BJP or the RSS. There were actually
the Hindu American Foundation. It was applauded. That report was applauded, which has been denied by many human rights organizations in Pakistan as well. But that's another story for another day.
That is.
So yes. So I'd like to hear, but we don't have much time left. So I'd like to hear what you believe will be the next steps for Canada.
Well, the next steps for Canada is, unfortunately, and we've been working on this tirelessly. Unfortunately, much like in America, there's a lot of groups that have sprouted out trying to put their pressure on Canadian politicians, being it provincially, federally, or if they're on committees. And there's a lot of money coming in from India itself, or from America coming to Canada, to try to pressure these Canadian politicians to not bring these issues up in the legislature or in the parliament. That's one side of it. There's also the side that I see on social media. They are themselves, I'm not saying they're members of the BJP or the RSS or they're pro-Hindu or whatever it is. They're spreading so much fake news and so much hate against the Muslim population, not only against the Muslim population, also against the Sikh population. In Canada, the Sikh population and the Muslim population have worked together. Many Hindu groups here have said that the Muslim population here sends money for the Khalistan movement. Whether that's true or not, I have not personally looked into it. So there is a bit of a divide between the Sikh population, the Muslim population, and the Hindu population. And that actually goes right up to the politicians in federally and provincially. So what can you do in Canada? I mean, I think that's one of the takeaways. What can you do in Canada is read the report. Just read the report. Just read the page 20 and page 21 of the report. Read it with an open eyes, and then just look at the history of India and look at what's going on right now in India. That should just open your eyes. Now spread the report to everybody. Spread the report to your friends, whether they be Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Jain, Buddhist, upper, lower caste. Spread it to politicians. Call your politicians. Send letters to your politicians. The politicians right now are home. They're not even in their office. Email them. Get them to read it. Get them to read. All the politicians here in Canada are educated. They're lawyers. They're doctors. They're executives. They should be educated enough to get past the bias. So that's all I ask. Whoever from Canada, American, Canadian, anyone from India, Europe watching this, you need to read that report. Once you read the report, it's an unbiased view of what's going on right now in India. Please, that's all you need to do.
Thank you, Shahab. So Dr. Khan, as we log off, and I'd like to ask the audience if anybody has any questions. I know we have people who've been commenting and leaving their notes as we've been live streaming. So any questions from the audience, we'll take them now. Otherwise, Dr. Khan, if you have any final thoughts on this.
Sorry, I hope Dr. Khan didn't get lost again.
We're having a little bit of trouble this time with, he's not in the studio anymore. So from my end, I will, there's a nice note from someone. So Farhana Khan Mutala is asking, where does the Canadian government stand on these violations against minorities in India?
So the Canadian government has always been very careful. Prime Minister Trudeau himself has a very good relationship with the Indian government. He was there, I believe, a year and a half ago, and he was everywhere he went. He wore shalwar kameez, he wore whatever it was. It was actually made fun of in Canada. I believe it was made fun of in India as well too. But he has a good relationship with the Indian government. Obviously, there is many people from India who work in Canada on workers' visas, whether it's Tata or whatever Indian companies. They have a lot of money invested both ways. So the Canadian government has to be very quiet about this. It's sad. Money, much like in America, money does rule the roost here in the parliament. and that's honestly just the truth.
That's it. As we listen to that, and it's kind of sad because that's something that I believe advocates and activists around the world face. So, but that is the reality, and to face that, but to know that despite that, this can be accomplished. This recommendation did come out. Like, this is something that everybody who cares about just that, like when we talked about this last week too, when the MIT thing happened, when MIT cut ties with. A lot of times when you're working on these causes, it just seems like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and things just seem to get worse and worse. So these small steps that are taken, they're the ones that start forming policy, right? And you don't know, you plan for the future. You don't know who will be in power next, right? How it could be better or it could go worse, right? We don't know. Modi's in power now, but he might seem like an angel compared to if Yogi ever became, Adityanath ever became prime minister. So I believe as activists, we need to take, or anybody working on any cause needs to take these moments and really see that it's a buildup, right? You keep working day after day, and you're standing on justice, you're standing on truth, and that truth somehow will shine through, and one day or the other. And sometimes people will act on the truth, and sometimes they won't. But we keep shining that light on that truth, and acknowledging and being that united front. It doesn't matter whether it's Hindus, Christians, Muslims, Dalits, whoever is in this, and other oppressed minorities. We get so many messages from Uyghurs or from Rohingyas. There are Rohingya people in India right now who are being targeted because they're Muslim. Like, so the levels of oppression, So I'm going to leave with the end, show you a sweet message left by someone who's been following this, that that's it. Like, we just keep chugging along, and we hope people support the work, and people come out of their safety net and that bubble that they've put themselves under, and are concerned. It's when concerned people make that call or try to do some action, that is when movement happens. And that's when when you educate someone else, and you share that news with someone else, and you verify it, and then you share it, then people who are in charge, they have to take notice, right? So inshallah, I know we've gone over. I'm sorry we lost. Yes, Dr. Han is back. Let's call him in to say thank you and get some final thoughts from him.
This is our first step. The battle continues.
This
is our first step. The battle continues.
Yeah, this is the first step. The battle continues, definitely. And here, would you like to say something before we end this?
Sure. Actually, I'll just reiterate what you said. Truth has a way of coming out forward. Now, if you take a look at the emblem of India, below that is written Satyamev Jayate. Satyamev Jayate is truth will prevail. Now, the Indians need to take a lesson from that. Satyamev Jayate. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just to add to that, Sister Hannah, I know we're stuck for time here, but sometimes everyone on the panel today, for everyone who's watching, you've seen people who have Pakistani Indian descent, whether it's Canadian or American. Sometimes it takes people that are not in the situation to do the work. Mm-hmm. So I'm asking whomever wants to do the work, whether you're Pakistani Indian descent, whether you're not from Europe, from Africa, you all can make a difference. Sometimes it takes someone from outside of the situation to be honest and to work hard without a fear of their life or fear of anything happening to their family.
Sure. And then that's a sober thought to leave on, because all of us, I know the three of us that are on this panel right now, we all have relatives in India that are in danger every day, right? This wasn't the case many, many years ago. I've spent many a summer in India, and there's some of the fondest memories I have. And so it's hard. We have an obligation, right, to speak up for those who perhaps cannot speak up for themselves, and because we don't have that sword hanging over our neck right now. So yes, that's a point reminder. Thank you for that. And Yeah, thank you all, and we will end this now. And we'll have in the coming days, we'll have an update on the Save Uyghur campaign, and there's a big report that we've been working on. So Aideen Anwar will be here to talk about that, as well as to give updates on Burma and the situation. Yesterday, our live stream went viral in Malaysia, and unfortunately, there were thousands of messages of a lot of, it was very sad to read messages of like hate coming from a country that's always had such a beautiful reputation of friendliness and against their own Muslim brothers and sisters. I felt like I was reading Trump supporters on, immigrants coming from across the southern border. So yes, there's a lot of work to be done, and it's Ramadan. So hopefully the work that we're doing will be multiplied, and the blessings from that. And I'm just hoping that any Hindu supporters that are listening, we really need your voices right now. We need you to stand up and fight for the country that you all were proud of, right? And to take it back to those were the glory days, right? When, and maybe things weren't perfect, but they weren't as bad as they are today. And we don't want to look 2 years from now, 10 years from now, and say, oh my God, 2020 was actually a good year, right? So yes, so thank you to all the listeners who are on here and listening. We appreciate you. We appreciate your support. And we're going to keep on talking about these issues, reporting on these issues. And we hope for your support. And we hope that one day, we can stand back and say our work is done. When the Bosnia Task Force shut down, it was shut down because there was no need for it. We didn't need to be advocating for Bosnians anymore, for Bosnian Muslims anymore. So we hope to God that one day there will be no need for a Save India campaign. There will be no need for a Save Uyghur campaign. And there won't be a need for the Burma Task Force anymore, because all these people who have been oppressed for so long will have finally gotten justice and be in safety in their homes. So thank you again. I hope you guys have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow.